the spring of 1945, a man was dragged out of a detention cell in a small German town. He had been hiding under a fake name, wearing civilian clothes, trying to disappear into the chaos of a collapsing empire. But someone recognized him. A Jewish survivor who had lived through horrors most people cannot even imagine, looked him in the eye and knew exactly who he was. What happened next was not a trial. There was no judge, no jury, no courtroom. Just the fists and boots of people who had survived what this man had done to them and their families. His name was Oskar Dirlewanger, and what he did between 1940 and 1945 placed him in a category of evil that even hardened Nazi commanders found disturbing. Stay with us, because this story does not just belong to the history books. It is a warning about what happens when a society hands weapons and authority to its very worst human beings. If you are new here, welcome to Timelines of War, where we dig into the real stories behind the battles, the monsters, and the moments that shaped our world. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because we post every week and you do not want to miss what is coming next. Now, let's go back to where this story begins. Early life. Who was this man? Oskar Dirlewanger was born on September 26, 1895, in Wurzburg, Germany. His father was a merchant, a perfectly ordinary man raising a perfectly ordinary family. Nothing in those early years could have predicted what his son would become. When World War I broke out, the young Dirlewanger threw himself into combat. He fought in Belgium and France, was wounded 6 times, and earned the Iron Cross both second and first class. By the time Germany surrendered in November 1918, he held the rank of lieutenant. On paper, he looked like a decorated war hero. But wars do not just take lives. Sometimes they reshape the minds of the people who survive them. And the man who came home from the trenches was not the same man who had left. Those who knew Dirlewanger after the war described him as mentally unstable, violently unpredictable, and consumed by alcohol. The structure of military life had been the only thing keeping him in check. Without it, he began to fall apart. And the rising Nazi movement was waiting with open arms for exactly that kind of man. The making of a monster. In 1922, Dirlewanger completed his doctorate in political science at Goethe University in Frankfurt. A year later, he joined both the Nazi Party and the SA, the storm troopers who served as Hitler's street-level enforcers. But even within that brutal organization, Dirlewanger managed to destroy his own standing. In 1934, he was convicted of a violent crime against a young girl. He was expelled from the Nazi Party, stripped of his doctorate, and sent to prison. For most men, that would have been the end of a political career. But this was Nazi Germany, and the rules bent in strange directions for men who were useful. Between 1936 and 1939, Dirlewanger was given a second chance. He was shipped to Spain to fight with the Condor Legion, the German military unit supporting Francisco Franco during the Spanish Civil War. This was not just a conflict. For Nazi Germany, it was a live testing ground for new military tactics, including the devastating use of strategic bombing on civilian populations. Tactics that would soon be unleashed on a far larger scale across all of Europe. Dirlewanger was wounded 3 more times in Spain. When he returned to Germany, he was rewarded with his Nazi Party membership back and his academic degree restored. The message was unmistakable. In the Third Reich, usefulness mattered more than morality. The Dirlewanger Brigade is born. World War II officially began on September 1, 1939. By July 1940, Dirlewanger had been admitted into the SS, the most feared and ideologically fanatical branch of the Nazi war machine. And then came the idea that would define his legacy of horror. After consulting with SS Chief Heinrich Himmler, Hitler approved the creation of a special combat unit. Its original recruits would be men serving prison sentences for poaching and related crimes, selected specifically for their tracking abilities, marksmanship, and survival instincts in rough terrain. The plan was to use them to hunt and fight partisans in the mountains and forests of occupied Eastern Europe. Dirlewanger was given command. But the unit did not stay limited to convicted hunters. Over time, it absorbed German criminals of every variety, men who had committed robbery, assault, and far worse. The Dirlewanger Brigade became something the Nazi war machine had never officially planned for, a gathering of some of the most violent and unstable individuals in occupied Europe, handed weapons, given territory, and pointed at civilian populations. The results were catastrophic for everyone who crossed their path. Poland and the first Atrocities. The brigade's first assignments were in Nazi-occupied Poland. Dirlewanger was made commandant of a camp at Stary Dziechow, built on the forced labor of Jewish prisoners. The unit also operated in the Lublin ghetto area. What they did there would set the pattern for everything that followed. Innocent people, men, women, and children, were subjected to organized cruelty that served no military purpose. It was sadism dressed up in the uniform of a military operation. Himmler knew. His close ally Gottlob Berger, who served as Dirlewanger's patron within the SS hierarchy, knew as well, and neither man moved to stop it. In the logic of the Nazi racial ideology, the people being targeted were considered subhuman. Their suffering was not just tolerated, it was viewed as an extension of policy. Belarus, 30,000 lives lost. In February 1942, the Dirlewanger Brigade was transferred to German-occupied Belarus, and the scale of their violence expanded dramatically. Their primary stated mission was anti-partisan warfare, fighting resistance fighters who were operating in the vast forests of the region. But the men under Dirlewanger's command made almost no distinction between armed partisans and unarmed villagers. Historians estimate that the brigade was responsible for the deaths of at least 30,000 Belarusian civilians during their time in the region. Entire villages were wiped from the map. The brigade developed a horrific pattern. They would round up the local population, the elderly, women, children, farmers, anyone present, force them into barns, and set the structures on fire. Those who tried to escape through the flames were cut down by machine gun fire positioned around the perimeter. They also conducted mass shootings in the style of the Einsatzgruppen, the mobile Nazi death squads that were simultaneously conducting industrialized murder across occupied Eastern Europe. Victims, often stripped of their belongings and their dignity, were marched to the edges of pre-dug pits and shot. Heinrich Himmler personally reviewed reports of the brigade's activities. He did not shut them down. He continued to deploy them. Warsaw, the massacre that shocked even Nazis. On August 1, 1944, the people of Warsaw rose up against their occupiers. The Warsaw Uprising was one of the most heroic and ultimately tragic acts of resistance in all of World War II. For 63 days, Polish fighters, armed with limited weapons and fueled by desperation and courage, battled one of the most powerful military machines in history. Adolf Hitler's response was absolute. He ordered that anything moving in Warsaw be destroyed. He wanted the city and its population eliminated as an example. The Dirlewanger Brigade was sent in. What followed in the Wola neighborhood of Warsaw became one of the most concentrated civilian massacres of the entire war. Over 40,000 Polish men, women, and children were killed in just a matter of days. Hospitals were set ablaze with patients trapped inside. Medical workers were targeted. 3 separate hospitals, full of wounded people and the staff trying to save them, were burned to the ground. The brigade moved through the old town of Warsaw like a force of pure destruction. Civilians of every age, prisoners of war, and anyone who could not escape were killed by gunfire, by flamethrowers, and by hand. No quarter was given. No one was spared based on age, gender, or circumstances. When the uprising finally ended on October 2, 1944, after 63 days, more than 150,000 civilians had lost their lives. The Red Army had been sitting in the suburbs of Warsaw throughout the uprising, and Soviet leader Joseph Stalin made the calculated decision not to intervene. His reasoning was cold and political. A successful uprising led by the Polish resistance, which supported the democratic Polish government in exile in London, would complicate his plans to install a pro-Soviet communist government in Poland after the war. For his role in the suppression of Warsaw, Oskar Dirlewanger was promoted and awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, one of Nazi Germany's highest military honors. The end of the war and the end of Dirlewanger. In October 1944, the brigade was deployed to help crush the Slovak national uprising, then shifted to fight the advancing Red Army in Hungary and finally inside Germany itself. By early 1945, the war was collapsing around them. On June 1, 1945, weeks after Germany's unconditional surrender, Oskar Dirlewanger was arrested in the town of Altschausen in southern Germany. He was in civilian clothes. He was using a false name. He believed he had vanished. He had not. A Jewish former concentration camp survivor spotted him and recognized his face. Dirlewanger was brought to a detention facility. The official record states that he died on June 7, 1945, of natural causes, listed as a heart attack. The truth, pieced together from multiple accounts, is that he was recognized by Polish survivors also held at the facility. They beat him to death. No investigation followed. No charges were filed. No one went looking for justice on his behalf. Oskar Dirlewanger died as he had lived, through violence. The only difference was that this time, he was on the receiving end. The story of Oskar Dirlewanger is not just about one man's depravity. It is about what becomes possible when a system of government decides that certain people do not matter, and then hands weapons to those willing to act on that belief. The survivors of Warsaw, of Belarus, of Poland, they carried these memories for the rest of their lives. Many of them never spoke about what they witnessed. Some did, and because they did, we know. History does not forget, and neither should we. If this video gave you something to think about, drop a comment below. What should we cover next on Timelines of War? And if you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. We will see you in the next one.